Okay, welcome back everybody to Caverns of Xaskazien 2, Episode 2, wherein we will look at the user interface and the controls. Let's start by loading our game. Boom. Potions, even befouled ones, can be identified with a high enough level of alchemy skill, as we detailed in the previous episode. While the amount of gold you can carry is limited by your strength, there is no limit to the value of gems you can carry. Did you know that? I did. Let's press key. Okay. After this episode, I'm going to raise the volume in the game, etc. A bit so we can hear a bit better. During this, as a matter of fact, right now, you can hear that. Listen to this. There you go. Hear that little tee-tee-tee? That is a cave cricket somewhere out here. And because we're going to be standing here talking for like 30 minutes, if I let that squeak continue, it's going to drive you and myself crazy because we won't be doing anything to stop it, and therefore it will continue to go forever. So, while we're on the options screen, I'm going to lower the sound effects volume right now by right-clicking. We'll come back to this later, but yeah, you can. This is not loud it gets, or down to nothing. Let's mute it for now. And we'll just remember to fix that later. Okay, here's Fandruff. So the first thing I really want to point out as we dive into this game, we did start recording, right? I got to double check that I've done my due diligence here. Due diligence being start recording. Done the basics of recording a video for you. The first thing I want to point out is that the thing we talked about in the last episode, that when you point your cursor at anything, it gives you details, holds true on this page as well. Like I said, anything except for the very first, the title screen and the loading game, anything you point at here, doesn't matter what it is, point at a button, that's what this button does. Your basic character statistics, point over here, point at the square, what is this square, what is this, blah, 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 what's this big purple glowing shit, oh, that's the ethereal void, there's nothing out here. Whenever you see this big glowing purple stuff, that is the edge of the map. You can't go any further west than this. Every map, by the way, takes place on a 40 by 40 grid. So let's start exploring with our mouse cursor and finding out what all this stuff is. Come on in, Curie. My little cat's trying to poke her head in the door. You are powerful enough to open a door, for God's sakes. There you go. You're tiny, but you can open a door. All right. So let's start off with this right off the bat and get some basic terminology down. This here, this I guess I can't. Pointing at this shows you stuff in info panel 1 here. Shows you what square you're pointing at, but this is called the view screen, just in case it ever comes up. This is called the map border. Doesn't tell you that either for reasons I'll explain later, but this is called the map border. Sometimes icons will appear along the map border. If they're appearing on the left side here, that indicates that it's a temporary effect that is beneficial to you. It's a boon. If it appears in the bottom down here, that is a temporary effect that is negative. I'm just going to make sure as well that this recording is recording everything I need to see down here. I think it is. Might be missing like 1 pixel at the bottom of the screen, but whatevs. All right. This over here is usually referred to as the sidebar. Everything above this line in the right-hand side of the screen is the sidebar. This is info panel number 1. Info panel number 1 is where any information is displayed if you're pointing at something other than a character, a monster or an NPC. As you can see, we point here, it's a wall. As we point here, it's a button. If you point at anything with your cursor, you'll always get information in info panel number 1. You point at info panel number 1, it tells you what info panel number 1 is. Point at info panel number 2, it tells you what info panel number 2 is, but I'll also share that details. If you were pointing at a monster, all of its stats would appear here. Or if you're pointing at a friendly NPC, all of its information would appear here. That's what that's for. Lastly, we have the situation panel down at the bottom here. This is where temporary information pops up to let you know what happened. All right. These are the various buttons in the game. You can change to one of them by clicking on it. Boom. That is our mid-power spells one. This is our perks list. This is the religions list. Don't touch these for the moment. I'll come back to those in a few minutes. You'll also see a little notation here. That's the hotkey. If we press 5, boom, we jump to high-power spells. We press 7, that'll jump to this one, which is mage skills. As you can see, if you're going to a button, it's highlighted with a yellow star behind it. That indicates which button you're looking at here. You can also cycle through them if you wanted by pressing the comma or the period. I'll go through them one by one. Let's go up to the character button. In general, my personal recommendation, if you don't have need of a specific type of information, the character button is where you want to leave this, because it leaves all information about your character on display, especially most importantly your health. If this is getting low, you're going to want to know that. Now, everything in this character panel you already know. We learned it mostly from the first episode. This is our race, Dogman. Our sex is male. Our class is Druid. Our religion is Duralin. If you want to know about the religion, well, this tells you about the concept of religion. If you want to know about the Duralin religion specifically, we go here and point to this and learn about Duralis. We'll come back to that later, though. Again, you want to know what your strength, dexterity, or intelligence or health does? This is it. There's also a color-coded bar that will shrink and change color from green to yellow when you're at the middle-ish of your health, and red when you're in danger. There's your spell points. They will likewise recede from right to left to this bar as you spend spell points. It doesn't change color specifically, though. This is your gold. It will fill up as you gain gold up to your maximum you're allowed to carry. As you can see, we are currently carrying 0 gold. We're only allowed to carry 20. To the right here, you'll see gems, though. And as I think we saw on the title screen as we were coming in here, the Did You Know tips. Gems are another type of currency. Gold, we can only carry 20. Gems, we can carry any amount. So if we had 2,000 gems, we could carry that no problem. There's no limit to how much we can carry there. We'll come back to faith in a second. Experience. We need to fill up this bar to level up our character. We are currently character level 1. We need 300 experience points to get to character level 2. We currently have 0. There are a lot of different ways to gain experience. The most common ways, though, the two by far most common ways, are killing monsters and delivering treasure to the temple. Treasure being gold and gems, the two different types of things collectively called treasure. We'll come back to that in a minute, other than to say, though, that there is a temple on this map. There's a temple on every single map without exception, somewhere hidden. If you go to it and step on it, you will instantly drop off all of your gold and all of your gems, and it will convert those to experience at a 1-to-1 ratio for most characters. This is our character level 1. Doesn't do anything other than tell us generically how powerful we are. As you saw, my one winning character on the title screen in the last episode was level 34. Gives you some indication of a rough level you might want to be before you win the game. Dungeon level, as I said, we got to get down to dungeon level 30. We're on dungeon level 1. We currently have 0 attribute points. If we had any attribute points, we could spend them to increase our strength, dexterity, intelligence, or health at a 1-to-1 ratio. That's all it says here. What else do I need to tell you? 1 second. Okay. Faith is the only other thing on this screen that we have not talked about yet. Faith has to do with your religion. And we're going to skip right down to the religion screen, therefore, to cover faith and get it out of the way. Our religion is Duralin. We have currently faith points at 0. It also tells us that here. This tells us our God's attitude towards us. 60%. She's kind of indifferent towards us. As we do things that Duralis likes, her attitude will improve. As we do things she doesn't like, her attitude will go down. Also, when we do things she likes, we will gain faith points. When we do things she doesn't like, we will lose faith points. Your faith points can go into the negative, by the way. If you have less than 0 faith points, it just means you have to do a lot to earn your God's trust back before you can start using faith points. You use faith points to cast miracles, which are listed right here. Because we're not playing an agnostic character, I'm going to cover one thing about agnostics as well. One of the 13 religions is agnostic. Agnostics do not worship a specific god. They kind of just worship all the gods equally. They do not have access to miracles whatsoever. They gain other bonuses in the game to compensate for that, but they do not have access to miracles, just so you know. The other 12 religions will give you access to miracles, and those miracles will always be unique to this god. No other god grants these miracles but Duralis. I'll come back to them in a second. First, let's look at our religion, Duralin, by pointing our cursor at that. It tells us here, Duralis is the goddess of nature and magic. She favors killing directly with spells, +5 faith, and the eating of fruits, nuts, seeds, and vegetables, +5 faith. She dislikes the killing of plants or animals, -15 faith, eating meat, -10 faith, and especially using any Pantosian prayers or shrines, -150 faith. She really hates Pantos, the god of madness. Now, I want to point out here one thing while we're pointing at it. The thing she dislikes, killing plants or animals, it tells you -15 faith. If we kill a plant or animal, our faith points will drop by 15. That is a solid 15 points every time. If we pray to Pantos in any way by using a prayer or by using a shrine, we will lose 150 faith points. Solid, accurate number. When it says eating fruits, nuts, seeds, and vegetables gives us +5 faith, that is not a solid number. That is the maximum amount you can gain. We will gain currently 60% of 5 faith points every time we do that. So the amount of faith you gain is dictated by your god's attitude. If you can get up to 100%, then you'll always get the maximum faith points. So i.e., try to do things your god likes to maximize your faith gain, which you can then spend on miracles. Try not to do things your god dislikes, because it will lower her attitude, make it harder to gain faith points in the first place, and on top of that, you'll lose faith points and make it harder to cast miracles. Having said all that, we will look at these miracles, what they are, in a minute. Let's actually go down the list, and when we come to religion at the bottom of this list, we'll deal with what miracles we have available to us. Inventory. A bunch of things here. We can see, first of all, what is in our inventory. We have 2 things only, a sickle and a wooden flute. Again, pointing at them tells us what they are. This is our sickle. It is a light axe. Strength required is 10. We have to have at least 10 strength to be able to equip it. We have 20 strength. No problem. It has a -9 to hit. Now you can see up here our base attack 1. This is the base % chance we would have to hit a monster currently. Now we have 40 dexterity. That gives us a base 40 chance to hit. But because we're using a sickle that has -9, we have a 31% chance instead. 40 minus 9 is 31. So if we met a monster right now that had 0 defense and there were no other mitigating circumstances, we'd have a 31% chance to hit it each time we swung. Base attack 2 only comes into play if you're dual wielding. We may or may not do that at some point in the game. I can't say. Base damage 2 only comes into play if you're dual wielding. Base damage 1. This tells us all the information about what will happen if we do hit with the first weapon in our hand, i.e. the sickle. We will do 1 to 6 damage, but we also have a 6% chance of doing an additional 1 to 2 damage. That is the bonus strength damage we talked about. Because we have 20 strength, which is not great, it's less than average to start, we have a 6% chance of doing an extra 1 to 2 damage every time we hit. The higher our strength, the higher that'll go up. Base defense. This is subtracted from monster's chance to hit you. You get it by certain skills, but you also get it by wielding armor would be the most common way to raise your defense. We have 0 right now. We are completely unarmored. We have nothing going for us. We're not good at dodging or anything. So whatever a monster's attack rating is, that is its % chance to hit us. That is our sickle. You can also see it is size small, i.e. it takes up 1 inventory slot. As you can see right here, we have only 10 inventory slots at the start of the game. That does not mean we can carry 10 items. Usually it does, but some items are bigger. They may take up 2 inventory slots, 3. I think the largest item in the game takes up 7 inventory slots. Very rare. That said, there are ways to increase the number of inventory slots you have. We'll get to that if and when we get a chance. Do bear in mind, as I said, the game is procedurally generated. I can't guarantee we won't die on the first level. Probably won't happen, but I can't guarantee it. The last thing we want to call your attention to, the last 2 things with sickle. Every item you point at has a value. That is the approximate value you could sell the item for. If we met a smuggler right now, that's the only people you can sell items to, smugglers. We could sell the sickle for 5 gold pieces if we wanted to. The wooden flute, by contrast, we could sell for 10. It also has a condition. All weapons and armor have a condition. As you use your weapons and armor in combat, the condition will degrade. Every combat round, there's a chance it degrades. And on top of that, every single time you hit with a weapon, there's a chance your weapon degrades, an additional % in its condition. Every time you get hit, there's an extra chance that your armor or shield or whatever also gets degraded. En route to 0 from 100%, there's no effect. If your sickle is at 100% condition or it's at 1% condition, it functions exactly the same. However, when it hits 0%, you can no longer use the item. You can't wield it. Now, as you can see, the sickle is listed in yellow, and this is listed in blue. Things are color-coded. Blue indicates the fact that that it can be used. If we were to left-click the wooden flute, we could use it. That's what the blue means. If it's listed in brown, you can't do anything with it. It just sits in your inventory doing nothing or doing whatever it does by virtue of sitting in your inventory. If it's listed in black, that means it is an equipable item. If it's listed in yellow, it's an equipable item that you have already equipped. So we start the game with a sickle equipped. If we were to left-click this right now, I will do it. What the hell? Whoops. We unequipped it. There. It takes a turn, but we unequipped it, and now you can see it's listed in black. We have no weapon equipped. Incidentally, you can see our base damage now has dropped to 1 to 1. We do 1 damage with our fists. But our attack is now 40 because we're no longer getting the -9 for the sickle. Let's re-equip it by left-clicking it. There we go. Let's look at the flute. The wooden flute. is a mundane item. It is a musical instrument. It also takes up 1 inventory slot. It is worth 10 gold pieces. Its status is active. We'll come back to that in a second. You may use the wooden flute once per level by left-clicking it. Doing so leaves a 50% chance that any animal-type monster in your square becomes charmed. Charmed monsters will seek out enemy monsters to attack, with experience for any kills they make going to you. So we can only use it once per level. We can only use it on animals, specifically. The other 8 overarching monster classes are unaffected by the wooden flute. If we did use it on a animal-type monster, there's a 50% chance the monster would then be charmed, and for the rest of that, until we left the level, or until the monster died, it would go around trying to kill other monsters for us, and we get the experience for anything it killed. Only a 50% chance of effectively doing that. Whether or not we are successful in using it, when we try to use it, its status will go to inactive. Its status will return to active as soon as we leave the map we're on. When it says once per level, it means once per map. If we go to another dungeon level 1 that's a different dungeon level 1, it would restore to active. If we go to dungeon level 2, it'll restore to active. If we were on dungeon level 6 and we climbed up to dungeon level 5, it would restore to active. We'll come back to more on that later. Incidentally, when you do descend to another level or go to another level, the entrance you used to get to that level is gone. You can't go back the way you came. So it's not like we could go down a staircase and then say we're going back up the staircase to the previous level and regain the active status. If we go down a staircase, we're on the next level. This level is gone forever. Never to return unless 1 in a 20 trillion chance-ish that it regenerated the exact same level, which would be very, very unlikely. All right, so that's all you need to know about that stuff. We talked about this. Reorganize, just so you know what this is. When we get more inventory items, you can see a little icon here to the left of the sickle. That little icon means it's a weapon. That little icon means it's a mundane item. If you click reorganize, it will reorganize all your items together. So all your weapons will be up top, then all your armors, your breastplates, then all your shields, then all your helmets. I forget the exact order. But it will group everything together so that you can more readily see what things are. Incidentally, if you ever want to drop an item, how do you do that? We talked about how to equip as left click. We talked about how to activate as left click. If we wanted to drop the wooden flute, we could right click it. And then you can see it down here in the situation panel. Are you sure? Drop wooden flute. If we clicked yes or pressed Y or pressed enter, any of those keys, we would drop it. If we hit no or any other key, I'm going to say F as an example, we don't drop it. So that's how you do it. You right click to drop stuff. Let's go to the low power spells screen. We started with 3 known spells, as you recall. Water Walking, Summon Vermin, and Hold Monster. Over here you can see how many spell points we have. We already know we have 20 from this screen, but when you're on the screen you need to know that from info too. So we have 20 out of 20 available. Casting Water Walking would cost us 20 spell points. That would be all our spell points for the entire level. How do you get spell points back, by the way? You have to leave the map. It's not like you can rest to regain spell points. This is how much we have as long as we're on this level. There are other ways to gain spell points, plenty of other ways, but the most common way is to go to a new map. So if we descend to the next level, we'll get all 20 spell points back. They don't stockpile, though. If we haven't used the 20 spell points on this level, it's not like we have 40 on the next level. We'll still only have 20 or whatever we have on the next level. I'll come back to that in a second. Summon Vermin would cost us 30 spell points. We cannot cast it yet because we only have 20 spell points. We also can't cast it because you'll see the intelligence required is 30. We only have 20 intelligence. Hold Monster would cost us 15 spell points. Intelligence required 15. All right, let's look at the more details here. Water Walking is a low-power aquamancy. What does that mean, aquamancy? Well, there are 12 different spell types. Most of the time, you can safely ignore what spell type it is. For most characters in most circumstances, it's not going to matter. Certainly at the start of the game, it doesn't matter. But it might matter later on. But for now, no, it's a low-power aquamancy. It costs 20 spell points. It requires us to have 20 intelligence to cast, which we have. This spell allows you to enter water, rapids, and whirlpool squares as if they were empty space for 61 turns. That's how long it'll last. Summon Vermin, if we could cast it, which we can't, as of yet, because we don't have enough intelligence or spell points, is a low-power summoning. This spell calls forth a summoned low-power monster of animal intelligence to fight for you. You will receive experience for any kills it makes. Summon Vermin can only be cast in an unoccupied square, i.e. we cannot cast it if there's another monster in our square. We'd have to leave that monster square, get into an empty space, then we could summon a monster to fight for us. When it says of animal intelligence, we'll come back to that more later on. But it doesn't mean it summons an animal. It summons a monster that has the intelligence of an animal. When it says low power, that means a monster level 1 to 10. So it's a very wide random range. You might summon something powerful enough to kill everything on the level for you, on this first level, or you might summon something that's going to get its ass kicked in a mere matter of seconds. The deeper we go, the less valuable that spell is going to become, because eventually it's going to be summoning things that aren't really effective in combat against the other monsters on the map. Let me let my cat out now. There you go. She can open doors from one side, i.e. she can push it open with brute force. She can't open it by virtue of turning a knob. He's not that clever. Hold Monster is a low power charm. It costs 15 spell points, requires 15 intelligence. This spell immobilizes the monster you are fighting for 120 turns. When it says the monster you are fighting, that means the monster in your square. Yes, there is no bump to attack in this game. Although I didn't specifically consciously remember it, it turns out, having seen the games in action, Dungeon on the Commodore PET and Sword of Fargol on the Commodore 64 both used this method, i.e. you enter the square of the monster you want to fight, you both occupy the same square, and while you're in the same square, you're fighting. So if we were in the square with a monster, we could cast Hold Monster at it, then we could walk away from it, and it wouldn't be able to leave that square for 120 turns. Not bad. Those are the only 3 spells we have. Now you can see a few more pieces of information here. Let's look at paper-sheaved spellbook type. You can find other types of spellbooks. We start with a basic paper-sheaved spellbook, and as you can see here, this spellbook type has no effect. Spellbook type may be changed through the use of blank spellbooks. If we found a different type of spellbook, we could choose to replace our paper-sheaved spellbook with that new spellbook. It wouldn't affect what spells we have, but it would affect the cost of different types of spells, i.e. there is certain spellbooks that would make aquamancy spells cost less. There are certain spellbooks that would make aquamancy spells cost more. So you're going to want to decide if you want to change your spellbook type if you find a blank spellbook at the time you find it. The last thing we need to point out here is spells known 3 out of 7. There is a mage skill called Memory right here. Memory, which we have untrained. You can tell it's untrained because things that you've trained are at least at the basic level are in black. Things, and they also say like basic, advanced, or expert. In the brackets, things you have not trained are listed in gray, and they have a little dash in the bracket there. So we are untrained memory. Untrained memory allows a maximum of 7 spells in your spellbook. That is why we are only allowed 7 right here. We've already used 3 of them. We can only get 4 more spells in our spellbook. If we want to get more than that, the easiest way to get more than that would be to raise our memory skill. At the basic level, we'd be allowed 14 spells. At the advanced level, we'd be allowed 22 spells. And at the expert level, we'd be allowed 30 spells. There are also items you can get that increase even beyond 30, your maximum spells. All right, that is the low power spells button. Mid-power spells and high-power spells function exactly the same. It just differentiates the different types of spells you have. Low-power spells, incidentally, require basic spell use, which all characters except for barbarians start with. If we didn't have basic spell use, or if we lost it somehow, we wouldn't be able to cast even basic spells. If we had advanced spell use, we would now be eligible to cast mid-power spells. If we had expert spell use, which we can't get as a dogman, incidentally, don't forget, we'd be eligible to cast high-power spells. Why can't we gain it expert spell use? Because we are a dogman. Dogmen can only gain advanced mage skills, and spell use is a mage skill, as you can see up top here. We're coming to that in 1 second, though. So that's all I need to know about those. Let's go into here. The next 4 things in a row are your basic, your different types of skills. General skills. We don't know any of them. When we do want to spend them, you can see we have 0 skill points available. To get skill points, the most easy way is to level up your character. Don't forget, the higher your intelligence, the more frequently you'll gain extra skill points on top of the ones you get for leveling up. Any skill point or any skill we want to gain in the general category is going to cost us 2. Now don't forget, because we are a druid, they're all going to cost 2. But if you were playing a different type of character, it would tell you how many skill points it costs to raise a general skill. Maybe it'd be 1 for some characters versus 3 for this, say. All right. You can also see here your max trainable general skill level. We're only allowed to train general skills to basic. Now, why only basic? Because our health is only 40. Remember, you have to have at least 30 in any given primary attribute to learn to basic. You have to have at least 60 to learn to advanced, and 90 to learn to the expert. Health corresponds to general skills, so our maximum trainable general skill level is basic, versus our max trainable mage skill level is untrained, because our intelligence is less than 30. I'm not going to go through what all these do. We'll look at it later on. But as you can see, there are a bunch of different skills here under the general category, all of which have different effects, and all of which have different effects the higher you train them to. I will say on one thing just to get it out of the way, there's no skill you don't want to train. Training any given skill to a higher level is always a good thing. There's no negatives to increasing your skills. Mage skills. Now, as you can see, we can only train it to untrained, but we already started with basic. Yes, you can start the game with skills higher than you're allowed to train them to based on your race and class. Because we played a druid, we gained basic alchemy. And these, like I said, every single character except for barbarians start with these at basic. What does basic alchemy give us? We already talked about this, but it helps us to identify low-level potions. Spell use basic, as I already told you, lets us cast low-power spells. Thaumaturgy basic. Your spell points are actually not just determined by your intelligence. They're determined by a combination of your intelligence, the dungeon level. The deeper you go in the dungeon, the more spell points you get, because the closer you get to Xaskazien, the more magic you kind of absorb from him. And Thaumaturgy is a skill that also increases your skill points. Your magic spell points. So a combination of intelligence, Thaumaturgy skill, and proximity to Xaskazien, i.e. dungeon level, are what determines how many spell points you have. That is why I said earlier on, when we go down to the dungeon level, we'll get back to 21 spell points. Or back to 20. We'll probably actually get to 21 or 22 or something, because we are descending, and therefore we'll get a few more spell points. Rogue skills. We actually start with a few of these. You can see our max trainable level is basic. It costs us 2. Blah, blah, blah. Lots of things here. We already know what all these do because we saw it in the first episode. Hunting, plus 30 to hit animals. Scavenging, plus 20 gold every time we find gold. Warrior skills cost us 2. We can train them only to the untrained level, i.e. we can't train them yet. But we do start with armor use basic. All characters start with that. That allows us to use light armor. We also start with weapon use basic. All characters start with that. Allows us to use light weapons. What is a light weapon? Well, you can see the sickle is a light axe, i.e. it is a light weapon. Therefore, we're allowed to use it based on our skill level of weapon use. Titanology, we already saw, it gave us plus 30 to hit versus giant types. Incidentally, although you do need, basic weapon use to use light weapons as a whole, there are specialty skills you can take. For instance, chopping. Untrained chopping has no effect. Basic chopping adds 3 to the damage you do while using any kind of axe. But you can see at the bottom, chopping may also stand in for weapon use when equipping axes. So even if for some reason we didn't have weapon use basic, we had weapon use untrained, which I don't think is possible for any character, but let's assume we did. If we had chopping basic, we would still be allowed to equip our light axe, or sickle, because it is an axe type weapon. If we had advanced chopping but only basic weapon use, we could now equip axes that are medium weight instead of just light. All right, and that is all we need to see here. We know everything about this. Okay, let's go down to perks. Perks here. We haven't got any perks yet. You can see none. You haven't yet acquired any perks. The most common way to do so is to level up your character. We can, though, still see our basic racial ability. Remember, as a dogman, we gain plus 2 dexterity each character level we attain. We can never gain expert mage skills. And as a druid, we gain plus 200 defense versus animals. We gain a bonus skill point every other level. All skills cost us 2 skill points, and we gain back only 1/2 health on reaching the new level. So you can always query those 2 things here. You can also kind of see it by pointing at dogman here, or pointing at druid here. All right, and as we gain perks, they will show up in this list, and we can query them. What do I mean by query, by the way? Pointing your cursor at something is called querying it, in case it comes up in the game. All right, let's move down to the stats menu here. We talked about monster attitudes already. Everything in the screen, by the way, the first stuff you see on the screen is all important to the game. If you get down far enough, there's also anecdotal information that doesn't have any bearing on the game other than if you're curious. We'll come to that in a second. Monster attitudes, we talked about this. There are 9 different overarching classes of monsters: aberrations, animals, diabolics, giant types, goblinoids, insectoids, persons, undead, and worms. All of these guys start with indifference towards us, except for worms, as you recall, start with hatred. Therefore, they have plus 20 to hit us. But if you ever want to know how various monster types feel about you, come here and you can see what benefits they're gaining. It also shows you this little symbol in the bottom corner here, this little sad face. If we were facing a worm, when we queried the worm, you'd see that little sad face on the screen to remind us that they hate us. Major deity attitudes. There are 12 major deities in the game. One of them is Duralis, as you can see right here, 60% indifference. There are 12 deities in the major pantheon. Those are the only 12 religions you can choose from the start of the game, unless you choose agnostic, which is the 13th. But there are a lot more than just these deities. As you can see, as we press this little arrow down here and click it, we can cycle down through. If we click this arrow that then appears, we can cycle back up. You can see it disappears when you can't go any higher. These are the minor deities. For the most part, these attitudes are far less important than the major ones. We'll come to why they matter shortly. For now, the one to really keep your eye on, the one that really matters to us, is Duralis. The rest of these are going to fluctuate as we do things that these gods like or dislike. So will Duralis's. We want to do things that she likes, though. just so you know, though, while you're here, you can point at any god and learn about it. Illumis is the goddess of luck. She favors the killing of giant types, plus 20 faith. We wouldn't gain any of this faith points. You can see plus 20 faith, plus 5 faith, plus 5 faith. We will not gain faith points from our Illumis because she's not our chosen deity. We will also not lose any faith points for doing anything she dislikes because she doesn't. We don't worship her. The only way we can gain or lose faith points via doing something a god or goddess likes or dislikes is for our own god or goddess. So only Duralis matters for those purposes. We can still, however, piss Illumis off. Doing things she dislikes will lower her 50% down to 49% or 48% or further. Doing things she likes will raise her attitude. Why that matters we'll come to later in the game. Likewise, these guys, you won't see anything about faith points with them because nobody can worship them in the first place. But you can still upset them or please them. There are far too many gods and goddesses, though, to really memorize what every single god or goddess likes. And no matter what you do, they have conflicting desires. So you're going to piss some of them off and you're going to please some of them. It's just going to happen as the game goes on. Anecdotal stats. Everything else down here is just stuff that you might be curious about. What is the toughest enemy we've killed so far? Nothing. How many enemies have we killed in combat? None. How many enemies have we killed by other means besides combat? None. Blah, blah, blah. How many pits have we fallen in? What is the most map damage we've taken? I.e., what is the most damage we've taken outside of combat from something on the map? Nothing. What is the total damage we've taken in the entire game to date from things that are on the map that aren't monsters? Nothing. Likewise, how much damage we've taken in combat, etc., etc., etc. As I said, anecdotal info doesn't matter in any way other than if you're curious. I'm going to put this all the way back to top, though, because it does cycle back down. And this information that starts on the screen here is the most important information you want on the stats. The monster attitudes and your deities. Attitude. Blah, blah, blah. Down to the options. We've already seen this screen before in the first episode. If we click this, we would quit and save. Let's not do that. Music volume. We can raise it by left-clicking it. You should be able to hear that louder now, I assume. I've actually muted it in my own ears for the moment because I'm talking so much. Let's put it back down to 3. Sound effects, we know we can hold down the button, make it louder. We can lower it back down to muted for now, like that. Monster health bar is on. There's no monster on the screen for me to see. I'm going to actually move to get a monster on the screen right now. Where's my little keypad? Don't worry, I'll come back to how you control things in a minute, but for the moment, let's... my number lock on? Oh, there we go. All right, you can see a monster on the screen now. So I can do this. Monster health bar is on. You can see this little green bar under the cave cricket here. It tells us how much health it has. If we click this to off, the bar disappears. If for some reason you prefer the pure graphics instead of seeing HUD information, you can turn that off. I just leave it on though. Player health bar, same thing. We can see we have a health bar underneath us. This will shrink and change color just like it'll mirror exactly this one. Where were we? But if for some reason you prefer to turn that off, whoops. There, turn it off on. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Darn it, what did I just do? Put it at basic. Player health bar on. Okay. What other information do we want to see here? You can also see there's a hotkey. It's P if you want to. Pressing P will likewise do this. Pressing M, I think. Well, I'll do that. There you go. Text prompts basic. This dictates how much information you get down here in the situation panel. If you really know the game like crazy, put this to expert, you'll get very, very little information down here. If you leave it at basic, you'll get lots of information. I'll be honest, I forget what it defaulted to. I wasn't looking at the screen and I clicked it. I think basic is what it defaults to. We're going to leave it at basic for now, which means we'll get maximal information down here in the situation panel as things unfold. But if you just want to speed the game up, if you already know what's going on, there's other ways to get this information. You could put it up to here and you'll get a lot less information down here. Most of the information down here requires a button press to dismiss it. That's why if you're finding it too slow, just up it to that. Combat output. When we're fighting a monster, little words and numbers will appear above our heads in the screen here. A basic text prompts will also be getting information about the combat down here, but on top of that, we're getting information scrolling up the screen here. I usually leave that at expert. Putting it down to basic will give you more information. By left-clicking, by the way. Right-clicking will raise it up to expert. Give you less information scrolling above. Lighting effects on and off. If you're playing on an older computer, one of the most CPU cycle eating aspects of the game is the lighting effects. You can see that right here. This torch is flickering, causing this. If you turn that to off, it no longer flickers and the game will speed up considerably. I I like to leave it on. I have a very solid computer, but if for some reason you're playing on an older computer, turn it off. It won't really affect much in the way of game play, but it can speed things up. This torch is still providing the same light it did, i.e. if a monster entered its range, we'd see it better, but turning it off will speed things up. Blood pulse effects on and off. Again, left click, right click. You see the hotkey for it down here, B. As our health drops very close to 0, as it gets low enough, I forget what the exact threshold is, the screen will start pulsing bloody, and there'll be a heartbeat effect to remind us that, hey, you're close to dying. If you turn that off, it won't pulse bloody. You'll still hear the heartbeat effect, but you won't get the bloody pulse if it's bugging you or if it's slowing things down too much for you. Screen mode I'm not going to affect right now, but left-clicking it will toggle it between full screen and windowed. I need it windowed right now for the purpose of OBS Studios recording this. Input responsiveness, I advise you don't mess with this, but left-clicking it will lower it, right-clicking will raise it. This is how many milliseconds have to pass between each key press before it will accept another key press. Lowering this too far down will result in every time you press a key, you might accidentally press it multiple times. It might be considered multiple key presses. Putting it too high will result in you having to press the key a lot to get it to register, hey, the fact that you're pressing a key. 150 for me seems to be the perfect level, but if for some reason your computer is faster or slower, you might want to mess with this. But in general, unless you need to, don't mess with it. Alternate font. When I first made the game, this is the font it used. Primitive. Why did I choose this god-awful font? Which incidentally actually writes off the screen here. It was because the original Caverns of Xaskazien used sort of a gothic type font, and I wanted to duplicate that experience as closely as possible. But a lot of people said it was hard to read, and although I disagreed with them at first, they're freaking right. This is much clearer. So if for some reason you prefer the immersiveness of, hey, alternate font, go for it. Otherwise, leave it like this. Cursor reveals dropped items. I can't really show you that yet, but I'll come back to that later. If we dropped a bunch of items in this square, say right here, we had 6 items here. If I pointed my cursor at that square, with cursor reveals dropped items set to yes, it'll list all the items that are dropped in that square. If I set it to no, it won't list them when I point at it. Key binding tips on. See this little 1 on the character, 2 here? Click that and it goes away. Again, if you prefer just the button icons, you don't want to know what the key bindings are, you're never going to use them anyway, go ahead and put it off. You want to remember what they are, go ahead and put it on. Monsters interrupt auto move when sighted. This is the default. We can cycle this through 3 different ways: when sighted, when encountered, or when nearby. You can only left click to cycle through the different options. We haven't looked at this yet. I'm going to come back to this in more detail later, but you can move around the screen by left clicking. If I click this square, we'll just jet over to that square. But monsters interrupt auto move when sighted. You can see right here what it says. Left clicking this will alter the conditions under which monsters interrupt player auto movement. Under the current settings, monsters will interrupt player auto movement as soon as they are sighted. If auto move is interrupted by such a circumstance, you may left click a square to auto move again. The auto move will not be re-interrupted by the same monster unless that monster gets within 2 squares of the character or first leaves the character's sight and then gets spotted again. If we put it up to here when encountered, left clicking this will alter the conditions under which monsters interrupt player auto movement. Under the current settings, monsters will only interrupt player auto movement if encountered. And when nearby, if they're within 2 squares of you, they'll interrupt auto movement, but otherwise they won't. I usually leave it to when sighted, i.e. if we click to move over here and we didn't know there was a monster and suddenly we see it, it might change our plan. We might not want to keep moving. So if you leave it to this, as soon as that monster shows up, it'll stop you from auto moving. If you put it instead to when nearby, it'll only do it if they happen to be within 2 squares of you. Set it to when encountered, it'll only do it if you're actually sharing a square with that monster. This is probably the safest way to leave it. Whoops, when sighted, default. Warned about excess gold only when already carrying gold. We can cycle through this only when gold is full, always. 3 different options. If you remember, we're only allowed to carry 20 gold pieces because our strength is only 20. If we were to go and pick this up, it's probably going to interrupt us and tell us, hey, you might find too much, because we can find up to 30 gold pieces here. But it'll only do that if we're already carrying gold, i.e. if we're carrying 0 gold and we go to pick up gold that is in excess of what we can carry, it won't bother telling us, hey, you might pick up too much here, because you're almost always going to be possibly picking up too much there in those circumstances. But if we're already carrying 20 gold, say, and we go to pick up more gold, having it set to this will say, hey, dude, you're already carrying gold. The gold you pick up, you're going to lose a lot of it because you're already carrying gold. Are you sure you want to do this? It'll prompt us. If we set it to only when your gold is full, it'll only do that for gold is at 20 for us. Here it'll do it if you have even 1 gold piece, because it will still affect how much gold we can find. Here it'll only do it if we have 20 gold in our current gold pouch. And here it'll do it every time, whether you have gold or not, but only if the amount of gold you find is in excess of how much you can carry. So it's just a matter of preferences. I just leave it to this default, only when carrying gold. We're not going to click this. If we surrendered, you can do that from here. That will instantly not only end the game, it'll end the game in defeat. You basically surrender to the monsters, it'll generate you a high score and call the game quits. Why would you ever want to do that? It is extremely unlikely, but there are really rare instances I can think of. I don't think I've ever seen them happen, but instances I can think of where you could get trapped, where your character cannot get out, and there's no way to proceed. If that happened, your only option would be to surrender. The only way I can think of doing that is if you accidentally teleported somewhere beyond a portcullis and the lever to operate that portcullis is on the other side of the portcullis and you couldn't get back to the lever to operate the portcullis or something, then it might happen. But other than that, it never will. And I've literally never encountered it happening in several thousand games. But if you need to surrender, left click it. Events. This doesn't much matter right now. Events are random things that pop up. They come into play and they either have one instant one-time effect or they institute policies that affect you for the rest of this level. Sometimes events pop up as soon as you enter a new level. Sometimes they pop up, 200 turns in. There's no way of being sure when an event could pop up. If there were any events in play, you could query them. You could point your cursor at them and find out what did this event do again? Oh yeah, that's what it did. Right now there are none, so we can't see anything here. We'll come back to the screen definitely later. But there is one aspect of the screen that you can see down here, and that is the next holiday is Bebarden Day in 5 days. Holidays are special events that take place, they're scheduled. They take place on the day that they're supposed to take place on. What time of year it is when you start a new game is randomized. In this case, we started a game coincidentally 5 days before Bebarden Day. Every time you enter a new map, the day advances by 1. So when it says 5 days, it means 5 maps from now. Bebarden Day will come into effect. You can see a status below is upcoming. When this event occurs, you will gain 15% of the total experience required to reach the next character level. At present, there's no way to learn anecdotal information about things like this, but just so you know, Bebarden was a halfling assassin who killed Salnash, the most powerful evil mage who ever lived. People celebrate his victory over Salnash once a year on the day of the assassination. So that's what will happen in 5 days. We'll gain 15% of the total experience required to reach the next character level. Okay. We've looked at most of the buttons here. Let's go to the map button. If you want to consolidate the whole thing to one screen, this is where you go. Right now, as I said, it's 40 by 40 grid. It's bigger than we can see. You can use the arrow keys on your keyboard to scroll the map around. You can also right-click any square to center the screen there. Boom. If you hold down the right button, it'll scroll the screen in various directions according to where you're holding it in relation to your character. If incidentally you've ever lost track of where your character is, you can either press C or you can left-click this button down here, center button. As you see, it's keyboard shortcut to C, or you left-click it, boom, it centers the screen back on us. But if you want to see the entire map in one screen, go to here. Much simpler map, but as you can see, we can see all the same things. This is the gold we saw there. These are the walls we were seeing. Most of the map we don't know what it is right now because we can't see it. And this is the cave cricket. So monsters show up as red, angry faces. You can also move on the screen. If for some reason you are hell-bent on playing a minimalist game, you could move right on the screen and it'll update the screen as normal, but you're losing a lot of good shit. All right, let's go back from that. Religion we've already talked about. Let's take the time, though, to look at our miracles so we know what we start with as a worshipper of Doralis. For the cost of 10 faith points, we could cast Aspect of Badger. This miracle grants you a 50% chance to turn any wall to rubble when you try to enter it for the next 61 turns. For 60 faith points, Aspect of Eagle. This miracle allows you to pass over water, lava, acid, any form of pit, chasm, or stalagmites for 91 turns. You will not be able to enter stalactites, i.e. we are flying when we cast that. Aspect of Hair. 45 faith points. This miracle increases your speed beyond that of even the fastest monsters for 181 turns. It hastes us. Divine Knowledge for 150 faith points. This miracle conjures you a random spell book. The spell's level will be commensurate with your dungeon level. Spell books, when you find them, grant you the ability to learn a new spell. That's how you get new spells. Duralan Influence. 45 faith points. This miracle restores 30 spell points to you. Duralis' Light. 45 faith points. This miracle increases your sight range to 11 squares and reveals all monsters and NPCs, even in unexplored territory, for 120 turns. It will even reveal invisible monsters and the true nature of disguised monsters, i.e. it's a light spell and an ESP spell simultaneously. Entangling Vines, 40 faith points. This miracle permanently immobilizes the monster you're fighting. We saw we have the hold monster spell we can cast to immobilize monster for 120 turns, but if we used this miracle instead, Entangling Vines, we would immobilize it permanently. We'd never be able to leave the square again. Identify for 10 faith points. This miracle opens the Identify screen. Left-clicking any one potion or scroll here will reveal to you its true nature. So that's another way to learn about potions and scrolls besides the skills. Scrolls work similarly to potions. You have to have runic lore skill to identify them. Or you could cast Identify on them with this faith. With this particular miracle, if you worship Duralis. Plant Growth, 60 faith points. This miracle calls forth a summoned monster of subtype plant to fight for you. You will receive experience for any kills it makes. Plant Growth can only be cast in an unoccupied square. At present in the game, there are only, I think, 3 different plant-type monsters, one of which is quite weak, one of which is mid-powered, one of which is high-powered. The advantage of casting this, you might end up with a high-powered monster. I mean, it may conjure in a really powerful bone tree to fight for you, or even a Strangling Vine, which is quite powerful. It might also call into play a Pilfer plant, which is a Pilfer Vine, which is pretty weak. You don't know what you're going to get. Plants, at least the plants that exist currently in the game, can't leave their squares either, so it would be an immobile monster you summon in. Recharge. For 80 faith points, this miracle opens the recharge screen. Left-clicking any wand, staff, or rod will recharge it to 6 charges. Wands, staffs, and rods, as we'll see as we progress, have a number of charges. Once they run out of charges, they can't be used anymore. There are other ways to recharge them, but one of the ways is to pray to Duralis for recharging it. It'll give it back 6 charge points, which is the maximum any wand, staff, or rod can have. Speak with Animals. This miracle gives a 90% chance of turning any animal in your square friendly. Friendly monsters will seek out non-friendly monsters to fight with experience for any they kill going to you. Now, we've already seen we have the Wooden Flute, which we can use once per level, which has a 50% chance of charming any animal. This miracle has a 90% chance of charming any animal, and it only costs 15 faith points, but it only works on animals, of course. Summon Serpent. For 40 faith points, we could conjure a serpent to fight for us. We get experience for any kills it makes. It can only be cast in an unoccupied square. That's all the miracles we have access to. That's all the miracles we'll ever have access to worshiping Duralis. All right, those are all the buttons that you can press here. We've already seen what this does, centering our character. Remember, if we move the screen off and press C, boom. This one's a bit complex. We'll come back to that last. This is stealth mode. As you can see, our current stealth mode is active. You can also see the fact that it has a finger in front of the mouth telling you shush. If you press Y or click this button, mouth opens, he's yelling. Current stealth mode is inactive. The only way that comes into effect is if you have any form of stealth skills. If you literally have the stealth skill, it's a rogue skill. We do not right now. We have it untrained. Or if you have items that grant you stealth abilities. If for some reason you wanted to negate those abilities, turn this to this way and it ignores all of your stealth abilities. Why would you want to do this? Stealth skills, various types of stealth, limit how close a monster has to be to you before it can detect you. At untrained, I think they're allowed to see us up to, I don't even know what it is, 16-ish. We'll come back to that in a second. But if we had stealth skills, it might be much lower. You could get it down to like 1 square. Like the monster has to be within 1 square of you to even realize you're there. But what would happen if there's a monster over here and you actually wanted it to come fight you for some reason? You wanted to lure it away from a different monster or lure it out of its environment where its environment was dangerous to you. If you turned it off, now the monster would be able to detect you as normal. It would come running at you, and then you could turn it back on when you wanted it back on. As a rule, unless you have a reason to, leave it as active. Monitor this. Don't press Y by accident and turn it off and forget it's off, because then you're losing all your stealth skills. Monsters detect you, by the way, in 3 different ways, I guess. We'll come back to that in a second when we start talking about the cave cricket, though. Combat state button. This is the last thing we have to talk about button-wise at all in the game. Almost there, guys. As you can see, combat state, it says is current combat state, if you look in the info panel number 1, is selectively fight. There are 3 different modes you can put this in, and by left-clicking, you cycle through those. Selectively fight, don't fight, or fight. Let's start with don't fight. If you set this to this, it has a red bar through it. You can see it says don't fight in the info panel number 1. Any monster who you share a square with, you will not swing at. You will deliberately choose not to fight any monster, no matter what it is that you're in the square with. If you set it to fight, you will deliberately choose to fight every monster you're in a square with. It doesn't matter who it is, you will automatically swing at it when you're in a square. What is selectively fight? This is a convenience button. It was suggested by a player, and I thought it was a great idea. What does it do for you? Let's right-click this button. Selective combat. If you are in selective combat mode, selectively fight, as you can see the dotted yellow line, is the default. Not don't fight and not fight, but selectively fight. These options come into effect. Any monsters that are currently listed as don't fight, you will not fight them. I.e., if we share a square with an animal, we will not swing at it automatically. If we share a square with a plant, we will not swing at it. If we share a square with a golem, we will not swing at it. I'll come back to that one in a while. Why do we not want to swing at animals and plants? It's just an automatic courtesy to us because Duralis gets mad if we kill any plants or animals. So as long as we're in selective combat mode and we haven't deliberately chosen to override these, we will not fight any animals or plants. So we don't have to worry about accidentally killing one of them and pissing our god off. It also won't let us swing at golems. Why? Golems cannot be hurt with normal weapons. You have to have very specific weapons to harm them. But if you swing at them, it'll still degrade your weapon's condition. So by leaving it at don't fight, you automatically won't fight them. You won't waste time trying to swing at them and damage your weapon when you can't hit them anyway. If, however, later on you actually found a weapon that could damage golems, you might want to turn this off. How do you turn stuff off in here? Again, right-click to get in here. Left-click to cycle that. Right-click to get in here. Click over here to get out of it, say. And then when you're in here, left-click to toggle. So now we would fight golems if we met them, or we wouldn't fight golems. If for some reason we didn't want to fight gnolls, I don't know why we would choose personally not to. That would be the way it works. Every animal in here, there's a reason why some characters might not want to fight it. That's why they're listed here. That's about all you need to know. Okay, we now have enough information to stop worrying about buttons. Let's look at the screen and find out what's surrounding us here. This is us, we know that. This is empty space. This square is passable to you and all monsters, okay? This is a wall. This square is impassable to you and most monsters. While under the effects of a wall pass spell, you may enter. Don't forget, if for some reason we cast our Miracle of Aspect of Badger, we could also bump into the wall to try to turn it into rubble, which we could then pass. This is gold. This square gives you the option of picking up the gold. If you accept, you find between 1 and 10 times the dungeon level in gold pieces, though your strength may mitigate how much you can carry. Excess gold that cannot be carried is lost. Gold in each square can only be found once. Scavenging skill can increase the value of found gold. So because it's a gold square on dungeon level 1, we can only find 1 to 10 gold pieces. But it says 21 to 30. That's because our scavenging skill will automatically add 20 to the value we find. So we'll actually find 21 to 30 gold pieces, bearing in mind we can only carry 20. So we'll automatically find our maximum gold if we go there and pick it up. What is this? Papers. This square could provide a map, a new random spell, a scroll, a prayer, or a skill tome. Or it could be a booby trap. Papers in each square can only be found once. Most of the time when you see papers or an object, we'll find that soon, it actually is papers or an object. But once in a while, it is a booby trap, and you want to be careful. If you're badly hurt, don't step on papers or objects, because it might hurt you. This is a brass gong. This square provides you the option of ringing the brass gong once, with one of 3 outcomes if you do. 1, nothing happens. 2, a random summoned monster appears to fight for you. Or 3, a random enemy, level-appropriate monster, appears. So doing that, if we were to go onto that square and use it, we can only do it the once. It would randomly pick one of those 3 outcomes. If nothing happens, then nothing happens. It's fine. We can't use the brass gong on this level anymore. If a random enemy appears, it'll be something that's appropriate to dungeon level 1, i.e. something within 5 levels of this. So a monster of strength 1 to 6 is what would actually appear, with a preference more to 1, given we're on the first level. If we were on level 10, it would find a monster between monster level 5 and monster level 15, just so you know. And if a monster appears to fight for us, I believe it's still level appropriate. I'm not sure. Probably just didn't have the space to put that text in there, but I'm pretty sure it is. I'll find that out at some point. If it's not, it should be. All right, we've seen everything we can see here. Also, this black stuff with the red eyes. What's this? Unexplored territory. The contents of the square are unknown to you. To reveal them, you must approach within sight range. 5 squares at the start of the game, though up to 11 squares with the right light source. And you have to have a line of sight to the square. Alternatively, find or conjure a map. How do you have a line of sight to a square? Well, it has to be nothing intervening between you that could block line of sight, i.e. this wall, or this wall blocks line of sight to here, so we don't know what's here. It could be, well, I can tell you right now it's a wall because it's the outer edge of this map, but we don't know what's here. It could be an empty space, or it could be gold there for all we know. We can't see through the wall. We can also only see 5 squares around us. The deeper in the dungeon we go, the darker it's going to get. We'll be able to see, eventually only 4 squares, eventually only 3 squares, eventually only 2, eventually only 1. Unless you have a light source of some sort, in which case you can see further. We have no light source right now. What does this torch do? Empty space with standing torch. The torch illuminates everything up to 2 squares distance. It is passable to you and all monsters. What does that mean, illuminating everything to 2 squares distance? Well, let's say we were way over here and had an unobstructed line of sight here. We hadn't explored here yet. We would still see the torch, and everything within 2 squares of the torch we would still see, even though it's outside of our sight range, because it's within the glow of the torch. If a monster entered that range, even from far away, we would see it. We can only see monsters up to 5 squares distant too right now, so if it happened to be around a light source and we were really far away from it, we'd still see it. Right now, I can tell you there's no other light sources we can see on the map, or else they would be showing up in here as a explored bit of territory. All right, the last thing we need to do, I think in the entire episode, because next episode we're going to start moving around. Let's look at this guy. Cave Cricket. Again, if you point at a monster, its information appears in info panel number 2. What do we know about the Cave Cricket? It has an attack value of 10. That means it has a base 10% chance to hit you. It has defense of 0. We don't have any penalties to hit it. Its intelligence is animal. I'll come back to that in a minute, but please note, intelligence animal does not mean it is an animal. It means it has animal level intelligence. It thinks like a dog. If it hits us, it will do 1 damage. 1-to-1 damage of type physical. That little sword means it does physical damage. Its speed is fast. Fast, incidentally, means faster than us. We can't outrun it. It may choose not to come at us, but we can't outrun it. It's faster than we are. It only has 2 health points, 2 hit points. If we kill it, we'll gain 10 experience points. Resistances, it has none. It can be damaged equally by all damage types. It has special ability in that it can enter stalagmites and pits freely. We can't enter stalagmites. They block our passage, but this thing could enter it. It could also enter pits. It could just hop down in it and hop back out without having to worry about being damaged by the pit. It cannot enter doors. If there was a door around here, I don't see one, but if there was, it couldn't pass through it. Its monster type is insectoid. Remember, there are 9 monster types. It is not an animal. It has animal intelligence, but it is an insectoid, i.e. an insect. And you can also get a full breakdown of our combat odds with it at the bottom there. You can see it in red. Our odds of hitting it are 31% chance to hit every time we swing. If we hit, we will do 1-6 damage, plus a 6% chance of doing 1-2 extra bonus strength damage. Its odds to hit us are 10% for doing 1-1. While we're on the topic, you can never have less than a 10% chance to hit a monster. It can never have less than a 10% chance to hit you. I mentioned earlier we can't hit golems. That's not true. We could hit them. We just couldn't damage them with the wrong kind of weapon. They have 100% physical resistance. That's why. Also, incidentally, you'll see your combat odds are written in red. You also saw red writing when we pointed here. Anytime you see red writing, it means the game is doing a calculation for you, so you don't have to do it. In this case, telling us we could find 21 to 30 gold pieces. In this case, telling us we have a 31% chance to hit, for example. All right, guys, it doesn't tell us anything here because there's no calculation to be done. Even here, it doesn't tell us any red writing because we already told us there are 3 outcomes. It'll be one of these 3 equally likely. No more information to impart to us. That's all we need to know for this particular episode. I will point out one thing, that the walls don't all look identical. They're graphically slightly different. So are the floors. There are, incidentally, as we go to different levels, different looking walls and floors too, just for thematic purposes, but they all function the same. That's all you need to know for now. We're going to call it quits here. It's probably been about an hour's episode. I'm not even sure. I'm going to look and see that right now. It has been, fucked if I know. I don't know how long it's been. Oh, just about an hour. Perfect. Okay. Been an hour's episode. Sorry I'm swearing. I shouldn't be swearing in this instructional video in case some kid says, hey, I want to play Caverns of Xaskazien. He's sitting next to his dad and says, hey, I'm going to play this game. And then he hears me swearing. He's like, don't play that game. That guy's a jerk. He'd be right. That's about all I got to tell you. We're going to press Q to quit out of here. Boom. Oops, I'm not in the, I'm in my OBS studios. Let's go into here and press Q. And we're going to quit again. And we'll come back next episode. We'll start moving around. We'll go fight that cave cricket, and we'll see what we can see. Talk to you soon. Bye.